footy fans. We are absolutely thrilled to have you join us in what's the first episode of a brand new little initiative we have where we're going to tackle all the things in local footy that we think might need improvement. We're certainly going to herald the ones that we think are going pretty well at the moment. And what gives this a bit of credibility, it won't be just me banging on all night like I normally do. I've got a couple of legends of the league here, two very, very important people to our competition, certainly to their respective clubs, but with a host of representative games, club games, some massive positions of office, and of course, a couple of life members of the league. Absolutely no shirks here, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, please, my co-host, Peter Van Dam and Corey Shackleton from the Terrigal Avoca Panthers and the Killarney Vale Bombers, respectively. How are you, fellas?
Good, thanks. How are you, Corey? Hey, Corey and Corey. Good to see you both.
You too.
Pretty excited to jump online and chew the fat. You know, we always talk a fair bit offline in regards to the comings and goings of the country football environment. So it'll be good to sit here and tell a few war stories and try and keep up with what's happening in the league. So good to be involved.
Likewise, thanks guys. It's great. It's good to have another platform to talk footy. Can't get enough of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, look, it's over the years that I've been doing a little bit of the commentary, you guys have been wonderful supporters of what I've been doing and what the league's doing, and always willing to have a good chat. And on top of that too, what you say makes complete sense. And I think, given that, for me personally, I did a little post a few weeks ago, and I actually spoke about the anticipation of this season, in that there's a number of really positive, I think, really positive initiatives that the league have finally been able to bring into play, and we'll talk about them today or at another time. But it sort of lends itself to, I reckon, something like this. We call this show The Front Spot, which is something I'm not overly familiar with on a football field, but you two boys certainly are. And I think the idea behind The Front Spot is we can help assist with that forward progress, the transition into a better place to play footy by putting heads together from some old stalwarts, some legends, some people who've been through thick and thin at their respective clubs and through the league, and hopefully at the end of it we might be able to find some solutions, if not really bring some focus on some good things about local footy that we need. I know you guys are very much have your minds in that particular direction. So it's great that we've come together to be able to do this.
Yeah, well, Shaq, we've played a lot of footy against one another.
Did he drop out for you, Shaq?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
You did.
You're back now.
Yeah, you're back now, mate. It's a funny thing. This particular platform decides when it wants to listen to you and when it doesn't. So it will even itself out as we go along, boys. Mate, that's the way online webcasting works, mate. It will make sure that at the most inconvenient time things will go wrong. I promise you. That's all right, mate. In the first episode, we're allowed to have a few tech glitches and teething problems. But look, the long and short of it is we're all about solutions here. And it looks like the first one is our own technical issues we have to solve. But we've got Shaq back again. You're back again. It wasn't a false start. We can pretty much take off where we left there. But I think you were saying something about many years you and Shaq have played against each other in footy. Yep. Yeah, definitely. I don't know if Shaq's trying to say something there at the moment. He's not coming through on my end,
No.
but there he is.
No, I'm just holding out. Just waiting until you everything's clear.
All right, mate.
Yeah, I think for mine, Peter, it's an interesting kind of stage you go through with footy, and we were talking a bit about it before, where I think when you're a player, you're quite engrossed in your own game and the team and the here and now. And yeah, when you get to the end of the footy, you start to think about those connections you had and all the people that you thought was an idiot and the opposition, and now they're just good people. So yeah,
Yep.
interesting to chat a bit more through that. But we've lost Pete, so
Yeah, mate. I think probably on this early one, until we get the tech glitches out of the way, we'll probably find ourselves coming in and out. Sometimes I feel like it's the system itself deciding who it wants to listen to be honest. But look, I think I share your sentiments there, boys. It's you're a long time retired when footy's over and done with, aren't you? And when it's given as much to you as what it has for us individuals, it's hard not to try and find a way to give back. And when you're particularly giving people, I think you find yourself just pouring whatever you can into your local club, into your league to try and see it improve. But I mean, that's exactly how you get improvement, is from people being able to do that. And I guess that's this platform here will lend itself to that a little bit. I know I've found that doing the commentary, I was very one-eyed Terrible Panther when I was a player, and everything I did was about making sure the club moved forward and the teammates were the ones who prospered. But now that I've been able to get out into the wider football community, I've found that I've got almost equally as good friends right across the league, and I absolutely love that discovery. Being able to determine that it makes me think it wouldn't have mattered where I lived if I played football. I would have loved wherever I was because there's something beautiful about every football club in this league, and I truly mean that. And there's some terrific people right across the board, and that's what drives me to do what I'm doing now. Is because it's not just about my club going forward now; it's about all of them. And I guess that's the beauty of the great game, and that's what it does for us. And we've sort of reached that stage now where we're in positions to be able to give back. And you two guys in particular have a wealth of experience, knowledge to be able to share and help improve it. And I can't wait to put that out to a broader audience.
Pete, you there?
I think he's on the reconnect as well, mate. We will iron this out. He says he's telling me he's on about 16%, Shaq, so maybe you go for it.
Yeah, that's right. Well, my dog's in the background losing its mind, barking at something. But yeah, it's an interesting point. Like I think when you play the game, the same thing. You kind of feel like the opposition. You couldn't see yourself ever being a terrible Panther or playing for Wyong Lakes or whatever. And then it's not till you kind of with maturity you get to the end and you think, like you said, they're just other blokes that want to play footy and be with their mates and have a kick and have some connection. So you do gain that bit of perspective, I suppose, as you get a bit older, and then once you leave the game as a player, you surely get that kind of that fresh hit of reality that, geez, any connection through football is pretty special.
Yeah, absolutely. I've really enjoyed getting to know some of the players that I had some great tussles with out in the field in the latter years. And look, we're going to tackle all sorts of topics in this. And if anyone who's familiar with you two guys' personalities in particular will love how we will roll this show out from week to week. We'll have little sub segments that we've talked about. Where one of them I call in particular, I think it's going to be great, will be called Love Shack and Van Dam It. And the reason for that is, if you knew Pete, he was a colourful character, and never afraid to speak his mind out in the field. Whereas, mate, I always remember you being a consummate gentleman, such a worthy opponent, and just a destroyer of opposition, especially out of the back line there. But you always had such a kind of a noble aspect to the way you went about it. So it doesn't surprise me you hold office at your club and you've coached a premiership at your senior side. You're one of those favourite son type of people. And, you received the accolade of life membership. And it just goes to show with Pete receiving his a couple of years ago, all you got to have is a commitment to your sport and you can get things done. I think we've got the right crew here talking about this at the moment in that regard. On that note, I wanted to lead in with that to... What was that, mate?
I was going to say, I reckon if you looked at Pete's tribunal record and put it against mine, they're probably at either end of the spectrum as well. Pete found a way to get himself in a bit of strife too, and like I said, I was the goody two shoes on the field. So yeah.
I come back at the right moment.
Absolutely. You know what, mate? It's Pete is a paradox because he's probably one of the greatest serving players to the league, and yet it's one of its worst enemies for most of his career. I think he spent at least 50% of his career hanging on to one more suspension, and he would never have been allowed to play again. But on the flip side to that, he's the highest cap representative player, and I just think, Pete, that in itself is a record to be proud of.
I'm not proud of that. I like to think of it as all I was doing was looking after my teammates, Corey and Corey. I was like, nothing ill towards anyone that didn't deserve it.
I'm only picking up part of what you're saying, Pete, but I'm sure it's something that I've heard in our discussions, off screen, that's for sure. I imagine, just so everyone knows too, we're getting little dropouts from time to time from one another just due to faulty internet connections and whatnot. We'll talk about where Pete is at the moment. We'll iron that out as it goes, but I imagine once this is all recorded, it actually comes in looking like there's no tech faults at all. So we do apologise if we look like we're a little retarded in the way that we're responding to each other, but that's the way it is, fellas. So we'll keep grinding it through. I'll use that as an option to move into something that I think is really important for us to discuss right now, and especially to hear what you guys have to say about it, and that's representative football. For those who aren't aware, the senior representative football coaching appointments were released last week with great news for both in that Kate Hanley from Newcastle City Blues is in charge of the women's division rep, and that I think this is the second or third crack at it, which is great news. So building a rapport with playing group there and reps for women. For the men, I'm thrilled with this one. Courtney Knight from the Newcastle City Blues is also been appointed as head coach there, and there's another one in the same vein of you fellas there from the Newcastle City Blues. That Courtney Knight, or the Knight name itself, is synonymous with the Blues. He was an ominous figure out on the field all the way through the 2000s, there's no doubt. So what a great appointment there. We're going to actually have a chat with him next week, which I'm really looking forward to that. But boys, it's also the 20th anniversary of the very famous, almost mythical, it's in folklore now, of the 2006 representative side where Black Diamond beat all comers in the country championship. So I don't have much more to say about that because I didn't play, of course, but you guys were front and center with that one. So I want to open up with hearing your guys' feelings about rep footy, where it's at right now, and plenty about your experience, particularly in that 2006 game. 20th anniversary this year, so I believe there should be some kind of celebration or commemoration of that because that was arguably the high point of Black Diamond football as far as I'm concerned.
There's some great players in the tournament, and after day one, we went through a sort of mini carnival sort of sequence.
I think he's on a reconnection thing again.
Sides and then played
he's at Pasterfield Oval, incidentally, at the moment, so we'll find out a little bit more about where he is.
Sunday,
I think it might still be a little secret at the moment, so we'll
let
him reveal that. Shaq, but yeah, mate, the floor is yours in terms of talking about rep footy. Very eager to hear what your thoughts are.
Didn't let them score again, and Michael Ryan kicked a goal from outside 50 that will go down in folklore. Just as the siren sounded for us to take the country championships, and we definitely celebrated long and hard into the night. And the bus trip home was probably the best part of the whole weekend.
To have people like Ian Grenlern and from there through to Gary Birkinshaw that kind of drove rep footy, and we there was a trip away involved. You went down for 2 nights. Down to the Riverina, went down with some pretty almost mythical creatures in themselves, the Gong and Mick Ryan and David Flynn and guys like Pete Van Dam. These guys were like superstars, and I was just blessed to be dragged along almost. I felt like it was just a privilege, and it was a pretty big weekend. Long weekend in June. It was pretty cold, and we stayed down there at a place called the Palm and Pawn, which was about what the name suggests. It was pretty rough.
Right? Was it really? Palm and Pawn?
Yeah, called the Palm and Pawn. Yeah, it was a pub, and we had accommodation in that out at North Wagga. So we stayed there on the Friday. We rocked up on the bus and then trained that Friday night at the North Wagga grounds out there, which is near the Palm and Pawn, and then off we went to the game on Saturday, and it was a 2-day carnival, and there was 2 fields. There's Mar Oval at Wagga, which is the kind of main ground, which is I think Turvey Park. Play out of there, which I think is where Groper's from, actually, another Terrigal lad.
Grope. Who's that? Who did you say there?
The main ground.
Groper. Which player did you... Groper, that's right, Cameron Grentel, that's right.
He played for Terrigal. Yeah. So he was from Turvey Park, I think, from recollection.
Yeah, he was. Bulldogs.
Yeah, so that was the main ground for the carnival, was Mar Oval, and us as the kind of lowly Black Diamond, we were placed over the road on a little secondary oval called Anderson Oval, which had a cricket pitch in the middle. They covered it in sand, and they kind of thought, well, everyone can come across the road and play us, and then they'd come back to the main oval and play the rest of their games. And we won every game, that day, surprisingly. And then the next day we went into the finals, which was the Sunday, and it was just an amazing experience. I think at half time against Riverina, who were red hot favourites, like there was a big crowd there, and newspapers and everything, because locally it was a pretty big deal. And
yep.
Yeah, I think at half time we were down. It was like 42-1. We were getting our pants pulled down, which is kind of what everyone expected. And then
42-1 at half time.
Yeah, at half time in a shortened game, and then the second half, I remember we had Clint Osterbury, Bubbles, we had Angus Darling, Mick Ryan, the Gong. Some of these blokes just started playing out of their skin, and we just come back. I think we end up winning by whatever it was, a point or something after the siren almost. And I don't know if they even kicked the goal in the second half. It was a blur, to be honest. I think everything from that moment on, I barely recall, because there was obviously lots of celebrations and festivities. But
I can imagine.
Yeah, all I remember is we were hounding Ian Grenlin about keeping our jerseys, for the whole carnival, and we're in the change rooms after the game, and Ian Grenlin walked in as his style, and I think he said something along the lines of, "And you can keep your fucking jerseys," and then he threw his arms in the air and got all excited, and everyone was pretty happy. But there's a whole
Mate,
other episode on what happened after that. But yeah, it was pretty
Right,
special.
and we will have that episode too. Make no mistake. It's mate, it's one of those things, and I think it's. I've just got a message from Pete saying he's struggling to get back in at the moment, but I'll get to where he is in a second. So we've got the floor, mate, between us for the rest of this particular episode. He'll be back with us next week. We'll be doing this every week. But mate, look, it's a wonderful story to hear. It's a great story to hear right now, particularly with representative football kind of in its infancy, I guess, because it's been reborn in recent seasons. But I remember back that time, and I was never been anywhere near the standard of representative footballer. But I remember as one of those sort of, I guess, lesser tier players who would dearly have loved to have played rep footy back then, remembering looking at the side that was going up there and just going, these guys are epic. And yet by the standards of who you were playing, you guys were virtually nobodies. So the level of folklore or mysticism that surrounds what you guys were able to achieve that week is real Mighty Duck stuff. Like, it's almost movie standard in that sense. You've gone up as gross underdogs. They've put you on a cow paddock across the road with zero chance of winning, and you've gone and beaten sort of just sub AFL level football players in regions that just live and breathe Australian rules football, and you've come back victors. And look, it goes without saying that is a pinnacle that the league was able to achieve to send you boys up there back in a heyday of football, where representative carnivals were a whole weekend, and the whole league stopped and waited and watched to see what happened as a result. I think I remember a lot of people went up there to watch that particular went down there to watch that carnival too. Look, it still stands to reason now that it's a standalone moment in Black Diamond, almost so much so that must have been a real shame for players like yourself to see representative football, especially in the men's division, to disappear for a little while the league sort of gathered itself and got itself back into a good shape. So it's good that it's back, but I'd love to know, how does that feel from a player who's a part of that, looking at it going, wow, rep footy's gone now, then now to see it reborn and seeing players of that type of ilk, especially coming out of Killarney Vale and Terrigal and that, we might be able to achieve that again sometime.
Yeah, it was disappointing to see how rep footy kind of evolved or kind of disintegrated a little bit over that period, probably in the late teens, 2018 onwards. Obviously, the league went through that transition, from the Black Diamond away, and then we had COVID and a few other things that all probably happened at the same time. But I had the privilege to play rep footy, but I was like you. I aspired to play rep footy. I wanted to be part of it. I was passionate about the league. I was passionate about being the underdog and trying to prove something, for who we are. And I think, I've reflected a lot on rep footy, and I think rep footy, it's great to see the people that are involved now in rep footy again. Knowing that Pete's involved is amazing, and obviously Courtney, and I hear that Flinny, like David Flynn, and also Mick Ryan are involved, which is fantastic for rep footy.
So good.
But I don't know what the reason was, but I found it interesting even as a coach, that over the last probably 7 years, a lot of players just aren't driven by rep footy. They whatever it is, I don't know what it is, whether there's a relationship difference between the players and the league now, I'm not sure. But I just couldn't have got enough rep footy as a player, and I think there's not that same sentiment now with the players, I don't think.
No, you're right, mate. You're right, and I've been on a little bit of a crusade the last couple of years to try and bring as much profile and credibility to representative football as possible. Look, the little bit that I'm doing in conjunction with the league, putting more focus into it, and whatever's happening around in clubland, I think is slowly building that up. But yeah, you're right. That's the importance of it is just not sold on the playing group of the day at this point in time. I don't think that's a good news in as much as now that we have breathed some fresh life into rep footy. I think it will be very easy to maybe make the current crop of players passionate about rep footy when we get a chance to sort of really talk about what the importance of it is. And you've suggested that what you just mentioned there about Pete and Mick Ryan and Dave Flynn as assisting Courtney Knight with the coaching of this year's reps side. That's going to be huge in itself, I think. That was an idea I actually floated like at the start of last year going, we need some old legends to come back from that side to come back and coach rep footy. You know, you pluck a coach who's already overworked from a club to come out and give a little bit of extra time, and it's usually because no one else has put their hand up. And straight away, the celebration of rep footy is dulled immediately when they learn that alone. You know, all of a sudden you pick somebody's appointed who's a legend, who's been through it all before themselves in the local league and put their body on the line, and then a couple of other legends chime in. And I don't know if Pete's let anyone know yet, but he's a part of that coaching staff now. So we've got some heroes of that 2006 side leading the charge with the reps, and I think straight away the profile and the excitement of being a representative footballer has got to infect the players now, surely.
Yeah, I think so. And it's a good point you make about, not trying to have a coach that's currently coaching a team there. Like, I think for the younger players, they'd probably hear the stories of, Courtney Knight and Pete Van Dam and some of these guys. And like you said, it'd be something new, something fresh, something for them to aspire to, someone they'd want to impress, show who they are and improve their worth. And as opposed to, not that there's any disrespect to coaches in the league, but, they're just an opposition coach in a sense. But, I think it's a really smart move, to do that. And I reckon it will, make a definite difference to hopefully the buy-in from the players.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Do you guys make a big deal about it at Adelaide Street with your players? Because, I mean, you got some stars in your lineup now. We saw you guys on the weekend, and look, you guys are going to be thereabouts in September, I believe, no doubt about it. Just a really great, fresh-looking group with some great structures working for you guys at the moment. But some of your homegrown talent in particular, who've played a couple of rep carnivals already, look like they're ready to burst into a next level when they play rep footy, especially if they've got the attitude that you guys had back in the day about it. Is it a big thing that you guys push at the club?
It's probably not as big as it should be. Like, I think there's definitely a failing of clubs. If everyone's like Kalani Vale, for example, like I know as a coach, I was really one of the younger players to get involved in rep footy just from a confidence perspective. So for us, guys like Brandon Lloyd and Ryan Arthur and those guys were great to see, roll into rep footy because you get so much out of it. The challenge is always, I always found as a coach was that some of your experienced players that are in their kind of 30s that you probably want in rep footy as a rep coach, they've got families and they're managing their bodies and, they're managing their time off and their work, and they start to lose that. They probably haven't got that same passion that I had when I was that age, wanting to play every last year of rep footy. They've lost that connection, I think. So I think there's a part to play in rep footy for the clubs, and there's a part to play in it from the AFL. And I suppose, I reflected on it as a player, and I felt as a player our league was really great in my time, if we call it the heyday. It was you felt like you were really important as a player. We were the product. Even though it's only the Black Diamond, there was profiles on the website, and you were celebrated. The league was celebrated it celebrated itself if it had to.
Yep.
I think now we've lost a little bit of that. Like, I don't think as a player,
good point.
feel as though the league appreciates them as
good point, mate.
Part of the league.
No.
A bit to be done.
Mate, I couldn't agree with you more. I was actually going to make that point tonight as well. I think they've done a lot this year to go in this direction, but it's almost since the AFL's taken over in the league, Not everything's gone according to plan. We've had a few changes of general managers. We had COVID, which horribly affected it, and decisions were made that weren't always favourable with everyone across the league, which is always the case. You're always up against it when you're a league administration because not everyone's going to be happy with it. But I almost get this sense that now that the AFL's taken over, it's really got itself sort of starting to establish a much better system now. Emily's been up there in charge for a couple of seasons now, so everyone's starting to get used to the way things are managed now. We've had some great initiatives coming into this season, coming straight out of the administration, but it is still the league has to prove itself and earn its respect from the playing group to a certain degree. And I think it's moving in the right direction to do that. But you're not going to go and put your body on the line and play your heart out and champion yourself unless you're doing it for something that you're really proud of, which is why you play so hard for your club every week. But if you want those next tier of players to play just as hard for their league once a year, then that something has to come where the league has proven itself as worthy of that representation. And I think with the handover from Black Diamond to AFL, teething problems and moving along the way that it has, it probably hasn't had that deserved contribution from the playing group. But now that we're starting to see change there, we're starting to see more money and resources put into promoting the profile of the league. We're seeing a little bit more cohesion. There's been some positive changes this year in terms of the tier structure and clubs being promoted, new club coming into the competition. There's a lot of good things to crow about this year, and I think that's going to go a long way towards starting to develop that respect from the playing group towards the league and them wanting to represent it in a footy carnival.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's spot on. I think Emily's doing a really good job. She's found her feet. We've got some continuity there. We changed, what have we called them, general managers, every year for about 3 or 4 years. And
we had four in 5 years or something, mate, which was just astounding.
So, like you said, the trust gets lost. And I think as administrator, like for me as a coach in the club, and I know for the players, and this isn't an Emily thing, it's getting much better, but there was periods there where we didn't have a fixture at round one. We're getting given a fixture the week before round one. And, I remember talking to Bishy about rep footy a few years ago, and he was saying, mate, I get asked to coach and I've got to organise everything to do with rep footy.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it was the league organised everything, and that's where it's got to. Like the league now is really proactive around rep footy, which is great. But I think they're just going to take time to build that trust up because I think they've lost a lot of trust with the players, that's all. So it'll come, but they're doing the right things at the moment.
But mate, you're dead right. I mean, personally, I've been fairly close to most of the steps towards getting to where we are at the moment. In some capacity, I was part of the working group that transitioned the Black Diamond over to the AFL. So there were a whole lot of expectations and agreements, and I think a lot of people probably felt the AFL were falling short of that for those first few years. And then there was a lot of sort of that "I told you so" type attitude going into those first few years of AFL. And I'm quite happy to admit I was highly critical of that in those first few seasons. I saw the blunt end trauma of some of those administration problems firsthand, and sort of what I do now is greatly to sort of not just help to promote the league. I do it for the players in the clubs essentially, but also to try and make sure that the AFL as a big corporation stays accountable for what it's got to provide for us. And I've got nothing but commendation for Emily and Josh at the moment, especially going into this season. They've pulled together a few initiatives in that off season that I wasn't sure were ever going to happen, and are right along the lines of what I think are credible and I guess constructive and progressive for the league, and it certainly put me into this season with a great sense of anticipation. So from my end, I'll throw everything into trying to promote rep footy now, because I think the AFL is finally getting to a point where their general AFLHCC is now generally worthy of good representation, and I want to see the young players really enjoy that process as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's happening with the live streams and the stuff you guys do with the podcast and that's filling that void that I think we've kind of craved as football people. And the AFL is getting better. Ollie Croft's getting involved now. We're starting to see we had football records on the weekend for Anzac Day.
Weren't they good?
Can seem like a problem, but they add to that feel of importance for the players.
They do, don't they? Yeah, mate. Look, it's just bringing a little touch of ceremony back to local footy. You mentioned the footy records, mate. You're so right. Ollie Croft, I think, is behind that and just done a remarkable job for a young bloke. He's got getting right behind the old media side of things. But you know, when you saw those budgets every week in the canteen when we were back in the Black Diamond AFL, you'd grab it, you'd see a couple of photos, you'd see your name written down there and your team list selected, little write-ups from all the clubs, and it was this hands-on little piece of history from week to week that they ended up in 10 of them in the bottom of your footy bag by the end of the season, but you'd still looked at them and you still read them, and it just created a little bit of, I guess, profile and credibility around it. And I think, the more that we could do that and talk to players and highlight the exploits of some of our great performers from week to week and not just review and preview games from week to week, but actually do stuff like this where we talk about this off camera all the time. And to be able to do this and say, open it up to the public. What do you guys think about that as well? All of a sudden we start creating a bit of dialogue and discussion, good and bad, about where we should be heading and how we should be sort of getting there as well, which can only bode well for not just the people in it, but the administration too. They can look at this sort of stuff and go, well, they make good points. We wouldn't have thought of it like that. And hopefully, these good decisions and strong initiatives keep coming in the future.
Yeah, and again, back to the footy record, I still remember it. You brought up about having them in the bottom of your footy bag, but, you remember they'd name the team of the week. There'd be the team of the week on the back of the footy record, and you'd go through it and try and find your name, and if you weren't in there, you'd get the shits, and if you got in there, you'd keep a copy of the record. And, that they're all little things that, again, it created a little bit of a connection as a player with the league, because you felt like they cared, and they watched you play footy, and they understood if you were good or bad. And I think there was something to strive for, and I think we have lost a bit of that, and I know it's coming back slowly, but there was a period of kind of mediocrity where we kind of almost celebrated mediocrity, and I'm a big critic of some of the things we do now, and it's probably unfair, but I think, we still should put cup footy, men's and women's cup footy should still be clearly the pinnacle, of playing football for clubs.
Tell me you're still there, mate. You just dropped out on my end. I'm hoping you're still there. Either that or our sensors just jumped in. They heard the word critical and jumped straight in. So I'll just give him a minute. Shaq was just talking to us about something he found critical, and I think our sensors jumped in and quickly cut him off. So are you back, Shaq?
Yeah, I'm back now.
They heard the word critical, mate, and went, shut him down. So, mate, go back to that. Quite literally, they cut you off at the word critical. So you said something about, I'm probably a little critical about this. So go ahead, mate. I just told the sensor to piss off.
I was talking. Sorry, can you hear me again now?
Yeah, got you.
I was just saying, I worry about the kind of drive towards mediocrity, and I get critical towards the fact that we probably don't celebrate men's and women's cup football strongly enough at the moment, and I feel like as clubs and also as players, we should be striving to play cup footy, and it's great to see some teams come into cup footy again this year, which is nice. But again, the things like the team of the week and those things, I feel like now, even when you look at the league presentation, and this might be a controversial thing, so it might cut me off again, but I feel like, we have a team of the year, and that should, a men's team of the year and a women's team of the year, and that should be it. I think your best 22 players make your team of the year, but we have a team of the year for cup, and we have a team of the year for plate, and there's people make the team of the year for plate, and they're not even in their club's best 22, and I feel like it's not trying to be disrespectful to those competitions, because there's a place for that, and I wish I was still good enough to play in plate footy, but I feel like it starts to water down the importance of cup footy, and then that waters down your connection to wanting to play rep footy, in my view.
Yep, mate. You've nailed it on. You've hit that nail so squarely on the head there. I couldn't agree more. I mean, even only from an entertainment or an interest perspective, at the awards ceremony, it makes it a longer, drawn out night that kind of just takes a little bit of the special ceremony of that night, when all of a sudden you're seeing representative sides in every single division. And Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Our clubs should at every stage be striving to get into play and compete in cup in that Premier Division and place their subsidiary sides in the other tiers. That's what they're for. That's what it's called reserve grade. And it's not taking anything away from the participants of those grades. You still got your best player and whatnot in it. But I mean, we don't have the personnel or the resources to be able to accurately determine who is the top Shield team or the top plate team at the end of the year. It's sort of just done, done for the sake of doing it, so that everyone sort of gets a nod. But yeah, I couldn't agree with that statement anymore. And I'm backing that up. It is great to see the success of Nelson Bay re-enter Cup last year. I was really harshly critical of that and wanting to see that happen last year. And then, of course, Wyong taking the step up as well. There's bumpy days ahead for clubs who have to go through that, but it's just great to see that, finally we're sort of getting that impetus to make sure that everybody's buying in and aiming for that. There's always that option for clubs to drop down if they do need to rebuild, and I think Singleton's a perfect example of that. No club could go through a tougher time than what they have done in recent years. So, you can't be more supportive of their need to go back and regroup and build up again to get up in cup. But they will keep coming because they're arguably have been the most resilient and tenacious football club around. They've always been sort of in that middle section, but had always turned up for cup every year, of course, until the tragedy that they experienced a couple of years ago. So, when clubs do need that, the opportunity is there to facilitate it, but it's got to be on an absolutely necessary basis, and we've got to get them back into the top tier as soon as we can.
Yeah, agree. And it makes sense. Like Singleton, like you said, is an absolute perfect example of why teams, would drop down so they can rebuild. And it's also a great platform to see the uni sides come in, and Port Stephens and Muswellbrook and Lake Macquarie,
Yep.
so they can build. But we've just got to be making sure there's a plan there. It's not somewhere where teams just exist, for decades in
Yeah.
this kind of mediocrity. Like they should be,
Yeah.
they should be growing, and we should be supporting them at all costs to get them up, because our premier competition shouldn't have whatever it was last year, 7 teams in a bye. They should be 10 or 12 teams in there, and it's the place you want to be. That's what we've got to drive for.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And at the end of the day, if you've got rebuilding clubs in Cup who are struggling against the top end of the competition, you've got to make sure you're fleshing out the bottom end of that competition. So at least there's a competitive area or a competitive group that can slowly build and get better sort of at that same pace. You throw one team in there. I felt for Batto Bay in their first couple of years because they're kind of thrown to the wolves. They had a couple of seasons where it was just them and their first hit out in Cup, and it made it very hard. And I was heading up the club at that particular stage. It makes it very hard for the playing group to remain enthusiastic if they know that there's no one else that they can sort of compete with at that level. Thankfully, they've been amazing in terms of how they're building, and they've gone about it the right way, placing themselves in a unique spot in the competition. And it's just a matter of time before we see them start taking some scalps well above them on the ladder. But where there is an opportunity to make sure that you can flesh the top end of the comp and the bottom end of the comp out evenly, and give everyone a fair go to try and have some competitive games through the course of the year, amongst some of the more blowout results that we see from time to time too.
Yeah, absolutely. It just makes sense overall. So, and like I said, these clubs that have come up, Batto Bay's proven that it's tough for a couple of years, but they're growing, they're building. They're still on the build, but they're going in the right direction. So, hopefully, Wong sticks with it, and the same will happen. I've got no doubt.
Yeah, I think so. The good thing about this, mate, I think this is a great thing, for clubs to see people like yourself, and of course you're the president of Killarney Vale now, and that's a huge role. Everyone knows the importance and the strength of Killarney Vale as a football club and where it sits in the market too. So for someone of not only of your credibility in terms of your playing career and as a coach, but now you're sitting in the top office at one of the strongest, most respected clubs in the competition. So your view has some weight, and when they see people like yourself and me, Pete, the other people we're going to have on the show, talking about things that is not just central to our respective clubs, but we're actually thinking about it the league outside of our own jurisdiction, and what's working and what's not working. I think a little bit of that sort of showing of cohesion of important figures at clubs is going to be encouraging for some of the clubs too, as well, the ones that are particularly trying to build up. And I think that's a good thing that we might be able to, hopefully we'll be able to achieve. I mean, I'm not being facetious when I say that. As much as I love Terry Gulavoka, the Panthers, and I love seeing them do well, my role now is to serve the league. I want to see everyone grow equally, and I don't think I'd be doing my own club a justice if all I wanted to do was, downgrade everybody who competed against us. If we want to be if your club wants to be the best, it wants to be the best against the best, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I'm obviously passionate. I know you are, and Pete's the same about Central Coast footy as well. Like, I feel like we've always been the small younger brothers in the league compared to Newcastle, which is fine. But, I even look at the weekend, like, we had the Anzac Day match against Baddo Bay, and, regardless of where we sat on the ladder, it was great to have two coast teams come together. And for those players, that if they weren't playing cup at Baddo Bay and they were playing plate, they got to come and play in front of, I don't know how many people were there, a few hundred people, and it was a great atmosphere, and it was great for football. And I know it's the same when Terrigal plays Baddo Bay, and I know when we play Wyong, it's the same. It's definitely a better standard of football, but it's just better for everyone to be involved in those environments where you can play some local derbies and you can get some rivalries and you have a bit of fun. I just don't think you get that when you stay in plate footy. It's not.
No, correct, mate.
So, yeah.
On that note, mate, hats off to the whoever is behind in your committee behind the Anzac Day celebration. It was the first one on the Central Coast, and long time coming too, by the way. Being involved with the Warners Bay hosting Carter for a number of years now, and it's just a different feeling on the Anzac Day. It's a special day for the country, there's no doubt. And to play footy on it, and in the circumstances where we're promoting it as the Anzac Day game, Adelaide Street drew a massive crowd. It was as big as any day. It was sort of rivaled when you had Daniel Lloyd play last year, I think. It was just a massive day there. Great atmosphere, good spirit. And like Baddo Bay, take nothing away from the Bombers jumpers, but Baddo Bay went above and beyond with that particular jumper. It really stood out and measured it. It wasn't the best day for them out on the field, but the Bombers are in amazing form at the moment. But just to see everyone get right behind that there and really celebrate what it was all about, I think it shows there's a real hunger for, I don't want to say the league, but there's a real hunger to see special instances and moments and days in local footy here on the Central Coast that is important that we do celebrate it when we have that opportunity. So I dare say it was a bit of a test to see how Anzac Day match went. We broadcast two of them, which we don't very rarely do, and mate, it went off like a cracker. I think Anzac Day on the coast is here to stay now for sure.
Yeah, I think so. And I must admit, I was probably a bit of a naysayer of Anzac Day games as a coach, probably because for most of the years Anzac Day fell midweek. It didn't kind of line up, and I was always worried about the commitment of players and what does it mean for those people that want to celebrate Anzac Day. Does it take away from the meaning, and how do you do it right? And then this year it just kind of it worked well that it fell on a Saturday, and we had some discussions with Baddo Bay. They come forward and said, what do you think? Could we have a go at this? And we kind of talked a bit about it and realised that I think it would work. And then obviously, like you said, it come together just as things do. They just grow organically, and then a lot of work went into it in the end. But I think it come off great, and I think both clubs have already said, listen, this is here to stay. Like let's go next year and do it at Baddo Bay, and let's keep it going, because like you said, it was great to have a bit of a feature match on the coast and for the league. And why would we not? Like you said, it was. I think for us, as a club, it was probably the biggest day in terms of participation and crowd since the 2022 grand final that we held. So
that's great.
You can't turn away from that. That's amazing.
Nah, mate, that's what it's all about. Local footy. We want to draw people to come and watch it. We want them to get involved. If it takes a couple of great days like that to pique the local interest to come and check out the footy again, or come once in a while and see what's happening down at Adelaide Street Oval or Hilton Moor or Passage Road or wherever it might be, Don Small here on the coast, then those type of events are going to be the thing that do it. And I can't help but round that up back to what we were talking about before. They're the type of days that will build trust back in the league, that will get people more, I guess, behind, a lot more empathy behind what we're trying to do. across the board and spill over into representative commitments as well. You know, if we look at the issues we want to tackle and improve in a little more globally and find multi-prongs to attack them and we all have a go at it together, then I think we're going to get those results, you know, where all of a sudden the whole league in itself is kind of growing together rather than everyone just sort of scrambling for whatever they can just to make their club improve.
Yeah, correct. And I think there's enough. Again, once you mature and you get out of involved in administration or coaching, you do realise that yourself and others. There's plenty of people out there now that just want to see the league succeed. So I don't think everyone's that stuck in their own world that it's all about Carnival or it's all about Terrigal. We want to see our club successful, but as you said, we want them to be successful in a successful environment. So.
That's right.
I think there's plenty of people that want to see this place grow. It's just how we connect everything and continue to build.
Yeah, for sure, mate. And well, you know what? I don't want to blow our trumpet too much, but hopefully we're going to be a little cog in that particular machine. I think because this little chat, and it's a shame that we lost Pete, but just so everyone knows, Pete's actually part of the men's. They've got their first rep training night tonight. I don't know too much about the process, how they've gone about inviting players and whatnot. Maybe that's something we might be able to cover next week with Courtney and how his selection process is going to work. But I'd like to hear a little bit about that and just how open the trials were, the invitations were to come and trial for reps. It'd be really good to know his process for any of the young, ambitions of the young players in the future. It'd be great to hear. But we're going to follow, in this show in particular, we're going to follow that representative program really closely and give you updates with it each week. And we're also going to follow the possibility of bringing you 2006 legends together some stage through the course of the year. I mean, some of the names involved in that one, we'll bring it back to that just before we round it off tonight, Shaq, because I'm sure you've got a beautiful dinner waiting for you or something like that, or got to go cook a beautiful dinner for the family. But I do want to finish back on that 2006 note because that is the pinnacle of Black Diamond competition football. I think was that period of time when I think was close to the best standard, close to the best result, great cohesion through the course of it. Probably club rivalry was probably a little higher than what it is now, but that's okay. We can work on that. But yeah, I think it'd be nice to finish off on that note. Was there any moment in that game, mate? I want to know. Was there any one moment you remember clearer than anything else, or is there something you did in particular that made you really proud of that contribution? I know Mick Ryan apparently kicked the goal after the siren from 150 metres away, apparently, against the wind, I've heard, because 20 years, mate, that story has built and built and built. But, I mean, it was fairly epic. Is there any one single moment from it?
Oh, I mean, definitely Mick Ryan's goal, like you said, from 120 out, against the wind uphill at the end there was pretty special. But I think for me, like all I remember as a player, like I felt like when I reflect back on it, I don't even feel like I even touched the footy for the whole carnival. I just remember being so fast. I remember playing off half back and a little bit in the back pocket, and I felt like it was just like every time I got the ball, I'd just be giving it off to, all I remember is guys like Angus Darley and Clint Ostenbury and Mick Ryan and Morris Goolagong just looking like they were at home and just living the dream, and me just feeling like an imposter the whole time. But
That's great.
Yeah, it was pretty. Like I said, I don't have any highlights from my end. Like I felt like I was just out of the league in terms of ability. But that last game, like I said, that final quarter. Whenever you talk about momentum in football, if you could have captured that last half of football in terms of momentum, it was just like we were running downhill skiing the whole time and just
right.
Please, it was just phenomenal. Yeah, it was amazing. It was a really just one of those overall kind of I don't know, just memories that were just, I don't know, like I said, I haven't got a football memory like it. Like there's winning grand finals and coaching premierships, and they were special in their own right. But it was just such a different thing, and I wish that everyone could have experienced it because it was really cool.
Well, mate, that's massive. What a great way to tail off our first episode, honestly, because that's the sort of thing I think that will really stoke the fire in the bellies of some players. Just hear it, you can hear it in your voice, you can see it in your face, that it was something special, something that not everyone gets to experience. And from my end, I certainly remember hearing from the players at my club about it, and just desperately wishing I was able to be a part of something like that, because and it's brought up all the time, and even to the point where, I remember playing against some of those players afterwards, and they were of a level where Adam Clark in particular was one. I used to play on Clarkey quite a bit when we played against Cardiff, and even just being named to say you could go and play on him and try and shut him down a little bit, to a point where, as a young footballer, as much as you want to go and try and beat that player in particular, it was an honour just being asked to go and run with him and try and stop his influence, sort of thing. Let alone walking past Dave Flynn. The man was a giant, and frightening level guys. So it's just great to hear a story of being a part of that, mate. I think it's a great way to round off tonight's episode.
Is that and like I said, we can go. We're probably a good session to go through next week and talk about the process we went through leading into 2026, like the selection process and training, and I got a lot of memories through that as well. So there's probably some really good things we can flesh out going forward if we want to compare 2026 to 2006 in terms of process and the vibe and how they went about picking the team and everything like that, because there's some good memories from start to finish, particularly for me as a kind of bright-eyed, fresh into the scene, running around with people who I idolised in a way. So that's probably a good topic if we talk to Courtney next week as well.
Yeah, 100%, mate. Yeah, let's do that for sure. One last one, mate. Would you have imagined back then, 20 years ago, how old were you at the Rep Carnival? Can I ask you that?
Would have been 24.
24?
25.
Oh, mate, so with a world ahead of you, would you have imagined you would have accomplished what you have and played as many games as you had, and had the impact that you've had on local footy in particular, to the point where, you're the president of your beloved football club? Would you have imagined that as a 24-year-old playing representative football, that your footy path was going to take the one that it did?
No, and I was one of those players that, I was happy just to play reserve grade when I first started. I never really, because I never wanted to let anyone down. I was driven by the fact that I never felt like I wanted to let my teammates down. So when I started playing first grade, it was an honour. But I was always so kind of worried that, it means I've got to work harder and I've got to do more because I'm going to let people down. And then got the chance to play rep footy, and I was like I said, I felt like I was just an imposter. Like I was like, what am I doing here? Like I feel like when I run it on the weekend, I'm playing against these guys, that were just my heroes. The guys that are kicking 10 goals on me every weekend, and now I'm kicking them the footy. This is weird. So to then project forward from there, and at that stage, I hadn't won a premiership, and obviously I hadn't done a lot of things, So if someone had wrote the script out from that point forward and said, you and I will be talking now, and I would have got to do what I did with football, I would have said, well, you're dreaming. Like I was blessed. And not blessed because of I achieved any great heights. Just blessed that I got to be involved in football and have those moments and be involved in all those great things. That was the thing. I didn't do anything special as a player. I just got to be involved in great stuff.
Yep. Well, mate, you're certainly not an imposter. I can tell you that right now. Whatever you might have felt on that particular day, it's led to a 20-year career, especially in local footy, where you're amongst the most respected people in the competition. Your opinions count. What you do makes a difference. And I think whether it was always going to go that way, or whether your involvement in that particular representative football had some kind of guiding influence in it or not, I guess remains to be seen. But one way or another, mate, you're here now and doing what you're doing, which is great for the competition. So I reckon I can't help but to say, we're products of our experiences most of the time, and that experience, mate, I know not being involved with it, not having that as an experience, has certainly influenced me to want to be more involved with football across the board. That's had something to do with it, because it comes up so often. So I can't imagine what a beneficial influence it would have had on you, Pete, and all the other boys who are involved with it. So it was really quite a special thing, that one, as is representative football every year. So mate, we'll highlight it every week. I think when you pass football, you can't help but bring up old highlights of your glory days. So we'll do that, a little bit of self-indulgence from week to week on this show. But I reckon with that, mate, we're right on about the 55-minute mark, and that's pretty good for us. So, mate, we're here every week, aren't we?
Absolutely.
I love that. That's so good. Well, hopefully we'll have a bit more from Pete, and we'll certainly know what happened at training when he comes through next week. But we'll try and schedule this same time next week, and we hope you can join us because we're going to bring you all this stuff about footy that you wouldn't even be thinking of at home, and it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun while we go. We'll have a few special guests next week, so well worth tuning in, especially if you want to hear all about the football legendary stuff from representative football in years gone by. So. Thank you very much, Shaq. That was great, mate. I think that's a success for tonight. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it was good. It was good fun. Absolutely.
Yep. All right, mate. Well, if you don't answer my calls during the week, then I know you're lying.
I'll answer your calls, I promise.
Yeah, good on you, mate. Thank you so much, bud. All right, we'll catch you again, reconvene again, same time next week with Pete Van Dam for another episode of the front spot. I was going to say foot, but the front spot. So it'll roll off the tongue before too long.
Thanks, Chop.
Well, all right, mate. We'll see you next week.
See ya.